Every year, around £52 billion is stolen from the UK's public purse. But up and down Britain, an army of fraud fighters is battling to win it back.
This money should really have been used to pay for the essential services that all of us use every day.
Benefit fraud does not pay.
What it effectively is people stealing money from you and I.
This is a huge amount of money and it's disgraceful.
From paying for the police and our health service, filling in potholes and emptying our dustbins, to making sure everyone has a roof over their head.
£2 million means an awful lot, but it was just the tip of the iceberg.
So it's absolutely disgusting what they do.
The investigators' mission has never been more vital.
Blatant lies just to claim benefits.
And the only thing I could put it down to is greed.
This is not a victimless crime. This is coming out of the public purse.
We will not let it go. We're like dogs with bones.
You will be found, you will be investigated, and ultimately you will be prosecuted.
The Fraud Squad are on the case. Today, a bogus dentist who's pocketing public money and putting patients' lives at risk.
The biggest concern for me was we've potentially got an individual here who is not qualified, who's operating treating patients under the NHS in a dental practice in London.
A trusted university employee using his insider knowledge to cheat cash from the local council.
If all of these pieces of paper had been used, it would have totalled about £3 million.
And could you help investigators put a stop to some of the £1.6 billion that's being fraudulently siphoned from NHS funds every year?
This isn't something we can do on our own, so it's so important. If you suspect fraud is happening in the NHS, please let us know about it.
Over 40,000 dentists, busy keeping the UK smiling and pain-free. It takes years of hard work and training before they're qualified to treat us. But in our next case, hundreds of patients were duped into opening their mouths by a pair of fraudsters, intent on only one thing: lining the pockets with NHS cash.
Fraud cases are notoriously complex. They can be very long-winded, they take time. Sometimes it is a case of it's not just about computers, sometimes it's about rolling up your sleeve and looking at documents, interviewing witnesses. That all takes time, but fraud is not a victimless crime.
As an NHS counter-fraud investigator, David Foley specialised in dentistry cases. And as an NHS patient, he understands the frustrations when it comes to booking an appointment.
It's widely recognised there are not enough dentists, and then when you do find a dentist, either have long waiting lists, or they're not taking on NHS patients, or they're just treating people privately. So, the vast majority of people are grateful and appreciative to actually see a dentist and get treated.
But what if the dentist you're visiting isn't quite what, or even who, they appear to be?
I recall this case came in, and it was not a formal referral per se, but it was more of a query regarding the identity of an individual.
David's been tipped off about a dentist working at a local surgery who doesn't show up on the NHS register.
The biggest concern for me, and the immediate priority, was we've potentially got an individual here who is not registered, potentially not qualified, who's operating treating patients under the NHS in a dental practice in London.
It's an astonishing allegation. Lives could be at risk. David needs to find out the truth fast. And he starts his search on social media.
So this was a really important image for the investigation. What it shows is him sitting in a dental surgery, purporting to be a dentist, writing a dental card.
He certainly looks the part, but now David needs to drill down into the facts and find out if his suspect is actually qualified as a dentist.
So there were a couple of key inquiries that I conducted which really conclusively identified that this person was not qualified to practice dentistry in the UK. We identified that they had entered the country as an asylum seeker, and we could also show that they were not qualified in the UK, having conducted various checks across different educational establishments. So that for me was a confirmation and a big alarm bell that we've got someone here who is actually not qualified, who is currently treating patients across the NHS.
Checks of the dental register in the suspect's home country reveal he isn't qualified or registered there either. It's a terrifying thought. But just how could a man with no known training become a practicing dentist on the NHS payroll? To pass himself off as the real deal, shockingly, the callous fraudster has stolen the identity of a recently deceased, fully qualified dentist.
This was as simple as the bogus dentist individual using the name and contract number of the deceased dentist. As far as the NHS were concerned, they wasn't aware that that individual had passed away, so his contract number was still open. So it's still a route to claim, provide treatments and also claim for services under the NHS, which this individual exploited.
The more David discovers, the more stunned he becomes. The suspect has been treating hundreds of patients, and not just for basic procedures.
A lot of these treatments related to quite invasive dentistry, more than a scale and a polish or a routine checkup. The provision of crowns, inlays, root canal treatments, all complex, detailed, invasive dentistry. It gives me a shudder thinking about it, because the risks are enormous, and I don't over-exaggerate. There clearly is a threat to life.
David speaks to some of the patients who the dodgy dentist has treated, and some of the stories he hears are terrifying.
By one patient I recall interviewing, vividly remembered that when they were in the chair being treated by this bogus dentist, the syringe to numb their gum before having an invasive treatment done actually broke off and became lodged in their throat. And they described to me the sheer terror that they honestly thought that they were going to die.
And all the time he's putting lives at risk, the bogus practitioner is lining his own pockets with NHS cash.
The system, how it's operated back then, was based purely on trust. So it depends on what the dentist ticks will determine what payment they received. So if you put a tick in here for example, a crown, they'll get a fee for that crown. If they tick several other boxes or put 2 or 3 or a different number in each of those boxes, that will determine what fee they get reimbursed.
So just how busy has the suspect been? And how much NHS cash has he been fraudulently pocketing?
We calculated that they treated in excess of 600 patients, and the fraud calculator that we could prove, put before the courts, was in excess of £120,000.
That's £120,000 of NHS money that's desperately needed in hospitals, GP practices, and genuine dental surgeries all over the UK. And when David investigates where the money is going, he discovers this imposter practitioner is using it to live the high life.
He was very driven financially, was very about the material things, so liked the sports car, liked the nice clothes, liked socialising at some well-known nightclubs in London, had a nice property in southeast London. So very comfortable lifestyle at the expense of the taxpayer.
The evidence against his suspect is overwhelming, but David still needs to figure out how the unqualified imposter has landed himself a job treating patients in a London surgery. Later, David discovers that the dodgy dentist isn't working alone.
What was apparent was that the dental owner was clearly earning a very good income and living a very comfortable lifestyle. So she didn't need to do it.
And could this piece of paper get the shady suspect off the hook?
So this document was produced very late on at the day of the trial, whereby his defence was that he actually was qualified and he'd undertaken a qualification in his home country.
Council tax scams account for nearly 80% of all local government fraud. They're an all too common and expensive problem, costing UK local authorities around £60 million every year. But that didn't stop the London-based fraudster in our first story from using insider knowledge to turn cheating the council into a lucrative side hustle.
This was a sophisticated and planned fraud, and the offender had used his position of trust in order to gain a monetary advantage for himself at the cost of the public purse.
This is the case of an audacious scammer abusing his role to defraud the council tax system for years, costing the taxpayer tens of thousands of pounds.
My name is Selina Miles, and I work for the Royal Borough of Greenwich in the Internal Audit and Anti-Fraud team. Our job is to investigate all types of fraud allegations that we receive that may be perpetrated against the council.
For Selina, catching out crooks is more than just a job.
I'm a true believer that public purse needs to be protected, and I believe that eventually anybody that commits fraud will be caught.
And when it comes to clawing back much-needed public money, investigating council tax fraud is always high on the agenda.
Council tax fraud is when somebody may give misleading information deliberately in order to claim an exemption or a discount on their council tax. So they might say that they're the only person living in the property when actually there might be another adult living in there.
One of the biggest legitimate council tax discounts is for students. It's a vital helping hand for those in education when money is often tight.
In a 3-year period of study, somebody could typically save about £3,000 off their council tax if they had full exemption. If a student lives with other adults, they may not get the full exemption, but they could get a 25% student discount.
But the discounts are only available to students attending a registered college or university with the official paperwork to prove it. And it was a hunch about a paper trail that first raised suspicions on this case.
One of the council revenues officers received a student certificate for council tax exemption for 2 students. Based on her experience, she believed that the application looked a bit suspicious, so she contacted the education establishment, which was E10's graduate school. E10's graduate school confirmed that they didn't actually have those 2 students studying at their college.
The eagle-eyed official declines the dodgy application, but the fraudsters aren't giving up easily and try again.
The 2 students wrote in again and said, oh, actually, no, we changed our minds. We're not studying at E10's graduate school. We're now studying at the University of Sunderland campus at Canary Wharf. And they provided student certificates which were authenticated from the University of Sunderland.
This time the paperwork looks legit, but something still doesn't add up. The fact that 2 separate students both claim to have switched to the same college at the same time seems like just too much of a coincidence. With alarm bells ringing, the dodgy applications are passed to Selina and her team to investigate.
We decided to ask for any certificate for student exemptions that applied for E10's graduate school and for the University of Sunderland. E10's graduate school confirmed that the person that had signed the student exemption certificates actually didn't work at the college. They hadn't worked there for a number of years. So we knew that there was something serious that was going on.
It's a major breakthrough in the case. A former employee is handing out council tax exemption letters to people who don't qualify for them. But how have they got their hands on what look like authentic exemption forms from two different establishments?
Social media checks were carried out, and it was found that the person who had signed the student exemption certificates for the University of Sunderland Canary Wharf campus had actually been employed by E10's graduate school.
It's another huge development. The suspects worked at both the places where the dodgy exemption forms appear to have been sent from. And investigators are stunned to discover he's still actually employed at the University of Sunderland's Canary Wharf campus. Later, the true extent of the suspect's deception becomes clear. He's not just fiddling the system to help others save money.
We actually established that he had been submitting student council tax exemptions for himself.
And it turns out it's not only the local council he's been ripping off. In London, fraud investigator David Foley is on the trail of a bogus dentist. The fraudster's not even qualified. He's been putting patients' lives at risk and treating the NHS coffers like his own personal piggy bank.
The behaviours of this individual in treating people when not being qualified to do so is appalling. The fact that this individual then went further again and used the identity of an individual who had passed away was despicable.
But just how has someone with no known medical qualifications been able to land a full-time job as an NHS dentist? To find out, investigators look into the person who gave the fraudster his job.
What was apparent was that the dental owner had built up a successful chain of dental practices. She clearly had a very comfortable lifestyle. So she had a very nice house, she had the trappings of wealth. She was clearly earning a very good income and living a very comfortable lifestyle.
David's convinced the practice owner must know her dodgy employee's dark secret. So, is it just greed that's led her to take part in the ruthless scam, or has something else swayed her?
As an investigator, you try to identify, one, the facts of what's happened, what has a person done, but also, what was the influences, what was the motivations? And clearly the motivation here was financial and greed. But also, I believe that there was an influence on the basis that these two were having a romantic relationship. So this bogus individual was, as far as I'm concerned, a clear out-and-out fraudster, a con artist, who was very confident, able to influence, convince people. And I feel that the legitimate dentist, the dental owner, sort of got caught on this journey. It wasn't that they didn't do any wrong whatsoever, far from it. But I think that clearly actions and behaviours were influenced by the fact that these two were having a romantic relationship.
The team discover the practice owner, who is a qualified dentist herself, employed her unqualified boyfriend. At first, she let him practice on her patients, but he's now treating them unsupervised. The conning couple are putting lives at risk with their lucrative scam. They need to be stopped. So, to prevent any more patients being put in danger, the police are called in to arrest them.
So it was a large operation on the day of the arrest. It was orchestrated early in the morning and all of the dental practices were searched. A large volume of records and computers, for example, devices, electronic devices such as phones and PDAs. We seize in excess of, I think, about 30,000 dental records. So I'm talking about complete filing cabinets, I think in excess of 9 or 10 computers.
It's all evidence that the investigation team will use to work out the exact cost of the fraud against the NHS. But for David, it's about more than just getting the money back. This scam has a human cost too.
Once the arrest took place, there was still a lot of evidence to collate and lots of investigations to do. To quantify the extent of this from a financial perspective, how many claims were bona fide or not. But added with that, to identify as many patients as possible who had been victims of this person and had received treatment from them. That was a real key priority as well, because it was important that we knew who those people were, whether there was any follow-up or remedial actions or support needed for them.
Documents seized from the dental surgery shine more light on how the callous couple have been cashing in. Not only are they being paid by NHS money for treatments he's in no way qualified to do, they're also claiming for procedures he isn't even performing. After months of hard work by David and his team, the deceitful duo are summoned to court to answer charges of fraud and deception. But even at the 11th hour, they plot a last-minute plan to try and walk away scot-free.
So they produced this document, which purported to be a Persian dental qualification document, which the bogus dentist claimed was his qualification. We very quickly, via a translator, identified that document had been fabricated because of the incorrect date of birth on it, where he would have been 12 when he qualified. And then, subsequently, we was advised by prosecution counsel that both individuals had changed their plea to guilty, which was good to hear from the perspective of it saved a potentially long, drawn-out, costly trial.
For her collusion in allowing her unqualified boyfriend to treat her patients, the practice owner is struck off the dental register and sentenced to 1 year in prison. The fake dentist himself, who treated over 600 patients despite having no training or qualifications, is sent down for 2 years. The convicted couple are also ordered to pay back every penny of the £120,000 that was fraudulently claimed from the public purse. Money that can now be spent where it really counts.
I can honestly say that the speed, I think, at which we took actions and we prioritised the patient's safety matter was, for me, a pretty classic quality investigation.
In the capital, the net is closing in on a council tax conman. The trusted employee is abusing his position to cheat a local authority out of thousands, depriving public services of badly needed cash. But fraud investigator Selina Miles is onto him.
Fraud like this has an impact on all residents in the Royal Borough of Greenwich and affects the ability to deliver vital services to the community like social care and building new homes.
Selina and her team have identified a university employee who's issuing what appear to be official council tax exemption forms from his current and previous employers and pocketing a tidy profit in the process. And now she's discovered the scale of his deceit goes even deeper.
Once we had a name for our offender, we actually established that he had been submitting student council tax exemptions for himself. That gave us a beginning to how this fraud may have started and how we got the idea to involve other people.
This fraud now goes far beyond a couple of dodgy council tax exemption claims. The fiddling fraudster's been falsifying paperwork in his own name to avoid paying council tax for years, saving himself thousands of pounds in the process. And having got away with it, he's spotted a business opportunity. He's abusing his role at the university to help others make fraudulent claims and charging them a fee for his dirty work.
Once we had an understanding that this same person was producing documents for both organisations, then preparations were made to continue to carry out an arrest with the police.
The suspect's house is raided and the team search it for vital evidence linking him to the crimes. And sure enough, they hit the jackpot.
We have the blank lettered head paper from E10's graduate school, and as you can see there's quite a few pieces of paper there. And then we also have the University of Sunderland blank headed paper.
The stash of stolen letter-headed paper is perfect for passing off fraudulent letters as the real deal. But by itself, it's not enough to cheat the system. It needs one more thing before the local council will authorise the all-important exemption. And the swindling employees got that covered too.
So these stamps were also recovered at the property. This is from the E10's graduate school and this is from the University of Sunderland. They would have been used to create the council tax student certificate. And as you can see on the bottom of this letter, it says it's not valid without the college stamp.
This is far more serious than a simple case of stealing from the office stationery cupboard. Together, access to the letterheads and the official stamps has allowed the greedy employee to commit fraud on a massive scale.
The investigation discovered that there are 18 cases involved where student council tax exemption certificates had been provided that were false. This involved approximately £36,300 worth of council tax exemptions.
It's a shocking abuse of the system. The suspect stealing public money right under the noses of his colleagues. But he's now been caught red-handed before the cost to the public purse gets even worse.
It was estimated that if all of these pieces of paper had been used for false student council tax exemptions, it would have totalled about £3 million.
Selina and her team have figured out how the fraud is being committed. They know who's doing it. And the discovery of the university stationery at his home could be just what they need to put their perpetrator away.
Finding this evidence at the property was really crucial to the investigation because there's no way that the offender could have denied his involvement in the fraud that took place.
With the evidence against him stacking up, the suspect is now out of a job and is running out of time.
Our offender was interviewed under caution. However, he decided that he didn't want to make any comment during the interview and declined to answer any questions that the investigating officers put to him.
The suspect's released on bail, while the anti-fraud team continue their investigations. And they start by examining the computers and mobile phones they've seized from his house.
So some of the messages that were found on the mobile phones included things like, that's £100 each year, mates rates. However, text messages that were found on the phone 14 months later stated, it's gotten more expensive, it's now £200 per year, but I'll do it for you for £120 a year.
The suspect's clearly being a bit of a wheeler-dealer when it comes to what he charges for providing the fake paperwork. And astonishingly, the team find evidence that he isn't just conning the council out of much-needed funds. He's also running a racket to facilitate fraudulent applications for discounted student travel.
Amongst the text messages was evidence that our offender had committed offences against the Transport for London. He had falsely authorised claims for student travel exemptions for Oyster cards, which came to about £10,000. The discovery of the TfL Oyster card fraud adds another layer to this investigation, as it not only affected the Royal Borough of Greenwich, but it affected all the Transport for London service users also.
The case against the suspect is complete, and he's rearrested and charged with 4 counts of fraud by false representation.
When the offender realised the stack of information against him, he eventually pleaded guilty.
He's sentenced to 18 months in prison and ordered to pay back some of his ill-gotten gains to avoid further jail time.
A process of crime application was made by the Royal Borough for £4,000 that the offender had to pay within 3 months, otherwise he would face a further imprisonment of 6 months.
A trusted employee, exploiting a system he knew all about, has been brought to book. But the investigators don't just bring him to account. Over 900 hours of community service is handed out to some of the people who took advantage of his council tax cheating scam.
It was very satisfying to not only get a sentence towards the main offender in this case, but also for the other people that were involved in trying to defraud the council by getting a council tax student exemption, which they knew they were not entitled to.
And it's not just the council that's able to claw back some cash. Transport for London also successfully recover £10,000 from people who knowingly ripped them off.
This was a particularly complex case, but we worked hard to ensure that we tracked all the people involved and recovered the money.
Over the course of this series, we've seen crooks cheating cash out of local councils, HMRC and the Department for Work and Pensions. But the crimes that seem to shock us the most are the ones committed against our beloved NHS. Sadly, some people will go to extraordinary lengths to try and profit at the expense of a service designed to look after the health of each and every one of us. Thankfully, there's a crack team of professionals that will do everything within their power to stop the fraudsters in their tracks. So who are these NHS investigators? What type of crimes do they tackle? And what can we do to support them? Alex Rothwell is the Chief Exec of the NHS Counter-Fraud Authority. A former high-ranking police officer with the Met, he has a team of investigators at his disposal, all working with one objective in mind.
The NHS is one of the biggest employers in the world. It has a big budget to pay for healthcare in the UK. And unfortunately, that also means that there's opportunities for people who want to commit fraud to target the NHS's budget. So we conduct investigations when we know that people have committed fraud. We gather intelligence so that we understand what types of fraud people are committing against the NHS.
For Alex, cracking down on the crooks who try to rip off the NHS is more than just a job. He knows just what the service means to so many of us and why it needs to be protected from these shameless fraudsters.
So there's a reason why the British public are proud of the NHS. We're all going to use NHS services at some point in our lives. I know I have. I'm sure I will in the future. So every penny that we can save, that could be money that goes into a doctor's appointment or surgery that we might need or some advice that we need for our mental well-being. So it's so important that we protect this money.
One counter-fraud investigator who does everything she can to protect that money is Cheryl Hill. The fraud that shocked her involved stolen bereavement checks, and it all began with a tip-off from a funeral director who suspected foul play.
These are cheques which are issued to doctors who certify the deaths of people that have died in hospital in order for them to be released to the funeral director for cremation.
The cheques, payments of £82 each, had been stolen from an admin office and then cashed by an unknown NHS employee.
This type of investigation is something I've never experienced before. The fact that you're dealing with bereaved families, it didn't sit right with me.
As an authorised financial investigator, Cheryl was able to find out the details of the bank account the cheques were being paid into, and crucially, whose name it was in. And she was stunned to discover it was a trusted senior staff member.
The financial checks we've conducted have confirmed that the account belongs to the specialist registrar at this hospital.
It turned out the thief wasn't an administrator, but respected Dr. Aled Marion-Jones, working in the hospital's transplant unit.
This is really surprising, as this is very unusual for a doctor to be involved in a fraud against the NHS.
Cheryl called the dodgy doctor in for an interview and discovered he'd been stealing vital NHS money to fund a serious gambling addiction. And the amount he'd pocketed from cashing the cheques was an eye-watering £34,000. But Cheryl's investigative instincts told her to dig deeper, and she discovered that the doctor had also been lying about the number of hours he'd been working.
Having looked at some of the timesheets, we can see that on occasions Dr. Jones has been on a residential appointment up in Merthyr Tydfil when he's also been on a non-residential on call for Cardiff. So you can see there's quite a bit of distance between the two locations. And that's not allowed because obviously Dr. Jones needs to be available for his on-call shift in Cardiff should an emergency arise. The same scenario again where Dr. Jones should be in Cardiff. He's actually completing a residential locum shift in Abergavenny. So again, you know, it's substantial distances. You can't be in two places at once. And he's getting paid for both of those shifts at the same time.
And as well as the financial cost to the NHS, Dr. Jones could also have been putting his patients' health at risk.
The impact of this could be that if somebody came in needing life-saving treatment, Dr. Jones wouldn't be available because he's not there.
Cheryl's analysis uncovered almost £30,000 of fraudulent timesheet claims, on top of the £34,000 worth of cheques he'd already stolen. When the case went to court, the deceitful doctor pleaded guilty to 2 counts of fraud. He was handed a 2-year suspended prison sentence and, crucially, ordered to repay the money he'd stolen, plus costs. And Lorraine Harris and Oliver Stopnitsky from the NHS Counter-Fraud Authority know just how much that reclaimed cash means to frontline care.
The NHS is there for all of us. It's there when we need it most, when we're sick, and it's there to keep us healthy and well. So the work that we're doing, it's important because that money needs to be used for what it's been deemed for, you know, rather than going off in the fraudsters' pockets.
Fraud prevention isn't the first and foremost piece of business for the NHS. Taking care of people and saving lives is, you know, at the forefront of what the NHS does. But we as a prevention unit, we've worked really closely with teams across the NHS to understand where the real vulnerabilities might lie.
And that often means relying on intelligence from external sources, like the anonymous tip-off that fraud investigator Steve Burtonshaw received. His suspicions were aroused about a senior nurse who was claiming she was too ill to work and was receiving significant sums of sick pay from the NHS.
She was associate partner for infection prevention and control. This role was predominantly out and about, visiting clients, different NHS trust organisations, and then writing up reports. A very senior member of staff, one of the highest paid nurses in the country, in fact, had been doing the job for some time and hadn't got that long before they were due to retire.
But it seems a salary of over £60,000 just wasn't enough for this nurse. She was suspected of earning thousands more by moonlighting for a private healthcare company, whilst being signed off sick from the NHS on full pay.
Over the course of the 2 years that we were looking at, I think there was approximately sort of 40 occasions whereby the individual had worked for this other organisation whilst off on sick leave from the NHS. So he's just getting paid twice to effectively do the same job.
Steve knew the cost of the fraud could run into the tens of thousands. But in order to put a stop to his shady scam, he needed some solid evidence.
I met with the other place of work, and they provided me with key evidence such as a consultancy agreement signed between both parties, invoices confirming what days and services the individual had worked for them for, evidence of emails. We obtained similar information within the NHS for the period that she was off.
And when the numbers were crunched, the nurses' illicit earnings were staggering.
Collectively, for doing both jobs, around about sort of £6,000 mark per month.
With the evidence mounting, Steve called her in for a voluntary interview under caution. Initially, the infection control nurse refused to come clean, but Steve turned up the pressure and she eventually admitted to having a second job.
Towards the end of the interview, they mentioned that they did do ad hoc sporadic work for this other organisation, but this was done in her own time, at weekends, and not during NHS time.
But Steve knew that wasn't true, and thanks to the evidence he'd gathered, he had the full backing of the CPS.
This individual was a respected and well-paid nurse, and the fact that they were claimed to do a job for the NHS and weren't doing that job, I think is deemed quite low. So I think that has a bearing on the charging decision made by the CPS as well.
The moonlighting nurse was charged with fraud and received a 16-month custodial sentence, suspended for 2 years. She was also ordered to repay the NHS just over £38,000 of sick pay. It's more money that will be used to provide vital hospital care, and another great result for the Counter-Fraud Authority. But for Alex and his team, protecting NHS cash is an ongoing battle.
Sadly, fraud's not going to go away anytime soon, particularly as we'll see more innovation in the digital space, which is great for patient outcomes and getting quicker appointments, all that sort of thing. But the reality is that also presents opportunities for fraudsters.
And just like the doctors and dentists he works alongside, Alex knows that prevention is better than the cure.
One of the most important things is our ability to prevent fraud from happening in the first place. It's far better to deny people the opportunity than to try and find out who's committed a fraud after it happens. But this isn't something we can do on our own. We also know that members of the public often have information about fraud that people may be committing against the NHS. So it's so important. If you suspect fraud is happening in the NHS, please let us know about it.
If you have suspicions that something's not quite right at your dentist, doctors, or local hospital, you can report your concerns on the NHS Counter-Fraud Authority website, where you can also find details of the team's confidential 24-hour telephone hotline. Join us again when the Fraud Squad continue their fight, bringing wrongdoers to justice and defending the public purse.
We really don't know what tomorrow's going to bring.
If you do commit crime, we will be coming after you.
Nobody is beyond our reach.
You can reach plenty more Fraud Squad episodes now on iPlayer. Here, a footballer scores a very unwelcome own goal, claimed and shamed, next.